Hi automotive enthusiasts! Welcome to Auto Archive, where today we're diving into a motorcycle that rewrote the rules of what a superbike could be. Imagine a world at the end of the 1990s, when Japanese manufacturers were dominating the performance charts. Ducati was carving out its racing identity, and MV Agusta was little more than a ghost from motorcycling's golden past. Into that landscape arrived the MV Agusta F4 750 of 1999, a machine that wasn't just meant to compete, but to resurrect an entire brand and prove that motorcycles could be more than performance numbers, more than engineering flexes, more than exotic toys. This was an Italian masterpiece designed to be rolling art, but also to deliver the kind of edge-of-your-seat thrills that enthusiasts craved. At first glance, the F4 750 looked like something carved rather than assembled. Its bodywork bore the unmistakable touch of Massimo Tamburini, the same visionary who had shaped the Ducati 916, but here he raised the stakes with sculpted lines that flowed like fine sculpture. Every curve suggested speed, even at rest, and every detail seemed to whisper of precision and passion. The underseat exhaust with its 4 gleaming pipes, the compact silhouette, and the unique headlight design all set it apart in a sea of sport bikes. This was no ordinary motorcycle. It was a declaration that MV Agusta was back, and back with intent. But beauty alone doesn't secure a place in the pantheon of motorcycling legends. Underneath the bodywork lay an engine co-developed with input from Ferrari, a 4-cylinder power plant that broke with tradition by using radial valves, a design that promised better breathing, sharper performance, and a sound unlike anything else on the road. It wasn't the most powerful bike of its time, yet it carried itself with such charisma, such sense of occasion, that raw numbers almost felt secondary. For riders, it wasn't just about hitting top speed. It was about living inside a piece of mechanical art, an experience that went far beyond the spec sheet. What makes this story fascinating isn't just the bike itself, but the way it symbolized a resurrection. The MV Agusta name had been a titan in racing decades earlier, racking up titles and prestige, only to vanish into obscurity. By the late 20th century, the return of that name with the F4 750 was more than a product launch. It was a cultural moment, a reminder of Italy's ability to blend performance with passion. It asked a provocative question. Could heritage, design brilliance, and uncompromising craftsmanship matter more than lap times in an era obsessed with speed alone? In today's video, we're going to peel back the layers of that story. We'll explore how the F4 750 came to exist against all odds, what made it such a radical statement both in engineering and design, and how its influence shaped motorcycling well beyond the year it was introduced. Along the way, we'll examine the human ambition behind it, the cultural hunger it tapped into, and the lasting mark it left on 2 wheels. By the end, you'll see why the MV Agusta F4 750 of 1999 isn't just remembered, it's revered. And with that, let's begin our journey into one of the most captivating motorcycles ever built. The story of the MV Agusta F4 750 begins long before its 1999 unveiling, rooted in a brand that had been absent from the spotlight for decades. Once upon a time, MV Agusta ruled motorcycle racing, dominating world championships with a fierce combination of engineering excellence and fearless riders. But as the industry shifted and the financial pressures of keeping pace with global competition mounted, the company faded into silence. By the time the 1990s rolled around, the MV name was little more than a nostalgic echo. Yet behind closed doors, plans were forming to bring it roaring back to life. Micro story. In the early 1990s, Claudio Castiglione, an Italian industrialist with a passion for motorcycles, saw opportunity where others saw a fallen giant. He had already played pivotal roles in the resurgence of Ducati and Cagiva, but MV Agusta represented something more personal, something more symbolic. For Castiglione, reviving MV was about restoring Italian pride in a world dominated by Japanese engineering might. He acquired the rights to the brand, set his vision on building a superbike unlike anything else, and set about gathering the best talent available. This was not just a business venture. It was an act of belief that heritage could matter again. Context digest. At that moment in time, the sport bike market was fierce. Yamaha had its R1 pushing boundaries of power to weight, Honda's Fireblade redefined what a road-going superbike could be, and Suzuki's GSX R Series commanded loyal followers. Ducati held its ground with championship credibility and evocative design. Into this competitive battlefield, reviving a dormant brand was not just risky, it bordered on reckless. Yet the very difficulty of the task gave the MV project its high-stakes allure. Success would mean rejoining the elite. Failure would bury the name forever. Micro story. To bring the dream to life, Castiglione turned to one of the greatest motorcycle designers of all time, Massimo Tamburini. Having just created the Ducati 916, Tamburini could have rested on his laurels. Instead, he poured his energy into a new project, determined to create something even more breathtaking. He envisioned a motorcycle that would combine elegance with aggression, where every element served both function and form. Early sketches showed sweeping lines, compact proportions, and the now iconic four-pipe exhaust under the seat. Tamburini was sculpting not just a bike, but a statement of intent that MV Agusta was back to inspire awe. Reflection bridge. It was in this fusion of ambition and artistry that the seeds of the F4 750 were sown. A machine was being born to carry not only speed, but symbolism. Context digest. Engineering the bike was no less bold than shaping its appearance. Instead of relying on off-the-shelf solutions, Castiglione pushed for something radical. The inline-4 engine would be co-developed with Ferrari engineers, a cross-pollination of automotive brilliance and motorcycle innovation. The radial valve system, never before used in a production motorcycle, was introduced to maximize efficiency and breathing. It was overkill to some, but to MV, it was essential to justify the revival. When prototypes first fired up, the sound itself, raspy, mechanical, yet symphonic, announced the brand's rebirth with authority. Microstory. As development progressed, whispers of the project began to circulate among enthusiasts. Photos of test mules surfaced, sparking fevered speculation. Could MV Agusta truly deliver a bike to rival Japan's finest? Italian magazines spoke of a revolution in the making. Meanwhile, in garages and boardrooms, engineers wrestled with balancing performance, reliability, and the uncompromising standards Tamburini demanded of design. Every detail mattered. The exact angle of the exhaust pipes, the integration of body panels, the fit and finish that would elevate it above mere machines. For Castiglione and Tamburini, compromise was never an option. Reflection bridge. The result was a motorcycle poised not simply to enter the market, but to redefine what riders expected from it. Context digest. When the MV Agusta F4 750 Oro was unveiled in 1997 as a limited production preview, it stunned the industry. With gold anodized magnesium parts, carbon fiber details, and hand-assembled precision, the Oro was priced at a level few could afford, but that was the point. It was not built for mass sales. It was built to signal excellence. By the time the production version arrived in 1999, the groundwork was laid. MV Agusta was no longer a ghost. It was an icon reborn, dripping with prestige. Micro story. Yet the launch was not without tension. Some critics argued that the F4 750 lacked the outright horsepower to dethrone the Japanese machines dominating the performance charts. Others dismissed it as more style than substance, a museum piece disguised as a racer. But those who rode it told a different story. The handling was sharp, the chassis balance impeccable, and the sense of occasion unmatched. Riders spoke of an emotional connection, a feeling like part of something larger than themselves. In that gap between critics and believers, the F4 began carving its legend. Tamburini's genius in design, Ferrari's influence on engineering, and Castiglione's relentless vision all converged to create the F4 750. And though it was born in skepticism, it emerged as a true contender. The stakes had been raised. MV Agusta wasn't just alive, it was challenging the world. With that foundation, the story moves toward the deeper struggles and triumphs that defined how the F4 750 would be received once it left the showrooms and hit the roads. Once the MV Agusta F4 750 rolled out into the hands of riders and reviewers, the conversation shifted from anticipation to reality. The world finally had the chance to measure whether the myth matched the machine, and the verdict was as complex as the bike itself. On the one hand, there was little debate about its beauty. It instantly became the poster motorcycle of the era, appearing in galleries, magazines, and collector wish lists. On the other hand, performance numbers mattered in a late 90s world where every tenth of a second on the track and every additional horsepower on the spec sheet made headlines. This tension between art and performance defined the second phase of its story. Micro story. Early reviews were glowing yet cautious. Test riders marveled at the stability of the chassis, the way the bike carved corners like it was guided by an invisible rail. The braking system was strong, the ergonomics race-focused but not unbearable, and the sound, a raspy metallic symphony, made every twist of the throttle intoxicating. But critics noted the horsepower figures lagged behind the latest Yamaha R1 or Suzuki GSX R750. The MV was fast, no doubt, but not the fastest. For some buyers, that single fact cast a long shadow over its other qualities. Context digest. This is where the cultural role of the F4 became crucial. For Japan, the 1990s sport bike wars were about domination: lighter, faster, cheaper, better. For Italy, and specifically MV Agusta, the goal was different. The F4 was never meant to be the people's superbike. It was meant to be an objet d'art that could still hold its own on the road. Its limited production numbers, high price, and exquisite finish positioned it more like a Ferrari than a Civic, appealing to buyers who wanted rarity and craftsmanship as much as outright lap times. Micro story. One story illustrates this perfectly. The Oro edition, of which only 300 were made, quickly sold out despite its breathtaking price tag. Collectors treated it like jewelry rather than transportation. Owners sometimes displayed them in living rooms, wheels never touching the street, preferring to preserve the bike as a statement piece. Yet even as these trophy machines sat idle, riders who took them to the track discovered a machine that rewarded skill over brute force. It was a motorcycle that demanded respect and precision, reminding its owners that it was not a casual toy. Reflection bridge. This dual identity, exotic masterpiece and capable superbike, both elevated and complicated the F4's legacy. Context digest. Another point of tension came from racing. MV Agusta had built its reputation on domination at the track, and many expected the F4 to signal a return to competitive glory. While it did make appearances in competition, results were mixed compared to its storied past. Some critics argued that without race wins, the bike's legacy would be incomplete. Others countered that its very existence as a road-going masterpiece was victory enough. In truth, the F4 750 was less about championships and more about symbolism. It was proof that MV could still create world-class machinery after decades of silence. Micro story. Among riders, experiences varied. Enthusiasts who wanted a comfortable everyday sport bike often found the F4 too uncompromising. The riding position was aggressive, the heat from the engine intense, and the service intervals demanding. But for those who embraced it as a passion project, those flaws became part of its personality. The bike wasn't trying to be easy. It was trying to be extraordinary. A ride on an F4 wasn't just transportation, it was ceremony. Every ignition a reminder of owning something rare and storied. Reflection bridge. This difference in expectations underscored the central question. Was the F4 750 truly a performance icon, or was it destined to be remembered primarily as an art piece? Context digest. The answer lies in the way it influenced the market. In the years following its release, manufacturers increasingly embraced the idea that superbikes could be beautiful as well as functional. Underseat exhaust became a trend. Sculpted bodywork became a selling point, and limited production halo models became a way to elevate brand prestige. The F4 was a catalyst for this shift, even if it never led the performance charts outright. It proved that design could be competitive currency in the marketplace. Micro story. Perhaps the most telling indicator of its impact was the loyalty it inspired. Owners formed small but devoted communities, swapping stories of their rides, their maintenance battles, and their pride in owning a piece of history. Many kept their bikes for decades, resisting the temptation to trade for faster, newer models. They understood something deeper, that speed is fleeting, but beauty and heritage endure. Even today, an original 1999 F4 750 commands admiration at any meetup, a symbol of a turning point in motorcycle culture. By the dawn of the 2000s, the F4 had already cemented its role as a cultural touchstone. It wasn't the sales leader, it wasn't the fastest lap time, but it was undeniably iconic. With its identity established, the next stage of the story focuses on what came after. How the F4 influenced MV Agusta's direction, how it evolved in new variants, and how its legacy extended beyond its own era. As the new millennium unfolded, the MV Agusta F4 750 transitioned from a headline-grabbing debut into a platform for evolution and legacy. The company understood that the initial spark needed to grow into sustained momentum, and the F4 became the centerpiece of that strategy. Variants, special editions, and larger displacement successors followed, but the original 750 retained a unique aura as the genesis of a revival. What mattered now was not only the motorcycle itself, but what it represented for the brand, the market, and the enthusiasts who cherished it. Microstory. In 2002, MV Agusta introduced the F4 1000, expanding on the 750's foundation with more displacement and more power. For many, this addressed the primary criticism of the original bike, finally allowing MV to compete more directly on performance numbers. Yet the DNA of the 750 was still present in every line and detail. The 1000 was less a replacement and more a continuation of a vision. This progression demonstrated that the F4 wasn't a one-off statement piece, but the basis for a family of superbikes that could evolve with time while maintaining their signature allure. Context Digest. Special editions became a hallmark of MV's strategy. From the Senna edition honoring the late Formula One champion to the Claudio edition named after Claudio Castiglione himself, each model carried symbolism and exclusivity. These weren't marketing gimmicks. They were vehicles for storytelling, each bike tied to a narrative that deepened the mystique of the brand. In a marketplace crowded with ever-faster machines, MV carved out a niche where heritage, design, and emotion mattered as much as statistics. Microstory. Collectors took notice, and the F4 quickly gained status as a blue-chip motorcycle investment. Auction houses reported steadily climbing prices for well-preserved examples, especially the early Oro and first-year production runs. Unlike mass-produced sport bikes that depreciated quickly, the F4 held and even increased its value, further blurring the line between machine and artwork. This shift also influenced other manufacturers to consider how limited runs and craftsmanship could bolster prestige, a ripple effect that reshaped the industry's approach to exclusivity. Reflection Bridge. What began as a desperate gamble to revive a dormant name had become a blueprint for how legacy could be re-engineered into modern desirability. Context Digest. Beyond collectors and enthusiasts, the F4 had a cultural presence that few motorcycles achieve. It appeared in films, adorned posters, and served as an aspirational object in the imaginations of young riders. Its design entered the canon of modern classics, studied by designers and celebrated in exhibitions. Unlike some machines tied tightly to their era, the F4 remained timeless, its curves immune to passing trends. Even as motorcycle aesthetics shifted toward sharper, more angular lines, the F4's sculptural quality held its ground. Microstory. At the same time, MV Agusta's path was not without turbulence. Financial struggles resurfaced, ownership changed hands multiple times, and the company wrestled with maintaining independence while producing low-volume, high-cost machines. Through these storms, the F4 remained the brand's anchor, a reminder of what was possible when ambition and artistry aligned. Each new owner or investor invoked the F4 as proof of MV's potential, a symbol that kept faith alive even in difficult times. Without it, MV might have disappeared once more into obscurity. Reflection Bridge. The endurance of the F4's reputation speaks to something larger than engineering or business strategy. It underscores the power of vision to outlast circumstances. Context Digest. Today, the F4 750 is remembered not only as the bike that relaunched MV Agusta, but as one of the most significant motorcycles of its generation. It influenced design language, shifted expectations about what a superbike could represent, and gave rise to a lineage that would last decades. Museums, private collections, and dedicated riders all continue to preserve its memory. To encounter one in the flesh is still to feel that same spark of awe it generated at its debut. Microstory. For riders lucky enough to still own and ride an F4 750, the experience remains singular. Modern bikes may outstrip it in performance, but few can replicate the sense of occasion, the balance of aggression and elegance, and the connection to a pivotal chapter in motorcycle history. Owners often describe a ride on the F4 as more than travel. It's communion with a masterpiece. That intangible quality is why its legacy endures, and why its story continues to resonate decades later. The journey of the F4 750 is therefore not simply about one motorcycle, but about revival, risk, and reward. It showed that design could be destiny, that heritage could be reborn, and that passion could create machines that transcend their time. From its birth to its reception to its lasting impact, the F4 750 proved that motorcycles can be more than performance tools. they can be art on wheels. And that legacy continues to shape how we see and celebrate superbikes to this very day. The MV Agusta F4 750's journey from dream to icon offers more than just a glimpse into motorcycle history. It's a reminder of how vision and persistence can transform an industry. From Claudio Castiglione's determination to resurrect a forgotten name, to Massimo Tamburini's mastery of form and function, to the engineering audacity of Ferrari's influence on its radial valve engine, the story is one of relentless ambition. It began as a gamble, arrived as a shock, and matured into a symbol that continues to resonate with riders and collectors around the world. The F4 didn't topple the Japanese giants with lap times, but it redefined the stakes. Performance could be matched with design, and a motorcycle could be both weapon and artwork. The cultural legacy of the F4 is impossible to overstate. Its underseat exhausts, flowing bodywork, and obsessive detailing set trends that rippled across the entire superbike market. More importantly, it gave MV Agusta an anchor to weather turbulent decades, proving that even in an era dominated by mass production and horsepower wars, there was space for passion-driven machines. Its scarcity, exclusivity, and enduring beauty have only deepened its mystique, transforming it into one of the most collectible motorcycles of its era. But perhaps the most enduring takeaway is what it represents to enthusiasts. The F4 750 showed that a motorcycle doesn't have to be the outright fastest to become legendary. It has to inspire, to stir emotion, to carry the weight of history while daring to push design into new territory. In that sense, it was never just about numbers, it was about presence, soul, and legacy. Looking back now, more than 2 decades after its introduction, the MV Agusta F4 750 remains one of the most captivating motorcycles ever created. To see one is to feel a rush of admiration. To hear one is to sense the heartbeat of Italian passion. And to ride one is to become part of a narrative that stretches from past glories to future dreams. It's a motorcycle that continues to command respect, not through dominance, but through timelessness. Thanks for riding with us on Auto Archive. See you next time, automotive enthusiasts.